You ever see someone get kicked out of first class, not with a scene or a shout, but with just 4 words that set off a chain reaction big enough to ground a plane and almost take down an airline? Because that's what happened to Major Hussein Kalani, and I was there to see every second of it, right from that slick, humming jet bridge in Istanbul. People in designer suits moving like they own the world, gate agents in their crisp uniforms smiling just enough to keep the peace, and then this guy olive green uniform. No medals, not a single stripe out of place, just a quiet kind of authority you notice even if you're trying not to. He slipped into 1C, first class, barely glancing around, the kind of presence that makes people sit a little straighter even when they pretend not to care. I remember Claire Bryant, flight lead, late 30s, always carried herself like she ran the sky. She stopped at his row, gave him that once-over, and you could tell, right then, she'd made up her mind. "Can I see your boarding pass?" she asked, polite but pointed. Kalani handed it over without a word. She looked at the seat, then at him, and then, almost like she was hunting for an excuse, she said, "Are you sure you're in the right seat? This is a premium section." He nodded, calm as stone. She pressed on, "All business. We've had people try to board first class in uniform before, hoping nobody would ask questions." No mistaking her meaning. Still, Kalani didn't react, just that quiet, immovable presence. And that's when Claire did it. She put her hand on his shoulder, leaned in, and for everyone in first class to hear, said, "You need to move to the back. This seat isn't for you." No checking his name, no real verification, just judgment dressed up as procedure. He didn't argue, didn't even sigh. Picked up his bag, walked the whole aisle with everyone watching and not a soul saying a word. Row 31, middle seat, that's where he landed, straight-backed, composed, tapping 3 times on a black screenless watch. No one knew, not even the crew, but with that tiny gesture, he triggered a protocol that would upend more than just a flight. Meanwhile, up front, drinks are being poured, jokes tossed around, but the storm had already started. 7 minutes later, the captain got a call he'd never forget, direct from Civil Aviation Authority, telling him his flight was now flagged, non-compliant under some protocol most pilots had only heard about in rumor. "Do not proceed to Doha," the voice said, and you could practically feel the blood drain out of him. Captain Rains tried to play it cool, radioed the tower, asked for a hold, but by then, 3 military vehicles were already moving into position around the runway. No logos, no nonsense. Back in row 31, the woman next to Kalani finally asked, "Did something happen?" He looked her in the eye and just said, "The moment she touched me, she touched protocol, and protocol doesn't like being touched." She blinked, not quite understanding, but it didn't matter, the dominoes were falling. The ethics panel was notified. The airline's internal score dropped off a cliff, and suddenly the story of Flight 488 was being live-streamed on TikTok, with teenagers and business travelers alike recording the unmarked vehicles outside. Claire's hand started to shake when Kalani came forward, handed her a sealed envelope stamped with the Ministry of Aviation Ethics. Inside, all his papers, all his clearance, and a formal violation report against her crew. It wasn't a complaint. It was a case. The purser whispered, "You moved a military officer with a ticket?" Claire's face said it all. By then, the captain was getting calls from diplomats, not airline ops, and was told flat out, "The plane will not move until the breach is reviewed and the crew suspended." The cockpit was locked down, passengers were filming, and at the terminal windows, the press and diplomats gathered in a buzz you could hear from economy. I'll tell you, when the boy in row 8 started streaming live, showing the black vans, the views shot past 90,000 in minutes. Every move was under a microscope. Back at headquarters, Skylift's risk analysts were watching their ethics dashboard plummet from 92 to 49, just like that. If it dropped any further, they'd lose their license in 5 countries. "Call the ethics officer now," someone shouted, panic blooming in boardrooms from Dubai to London. And there was a twist nobody saw coming. Ethan Clay, former deputy ethics auditor, barged into a crisis meeting, tossed down memos showing the airline had been warned about recurring bias about Claire, about the culture. HR had buried the reports. "You never thought one of them would be the one with power," he said, and that's when the legal team realized this wasn't about one crew member, It was about the system that made her feel safe doing it. Within hours, ethics tribunals in 3 countries had access to every camera angle, every cockpit recording. The panel reviewed the data, and in a moment of perfect irony, they found Skylift's own AI flagging the crew for escalation based on appearance, not process. The verdict came quick: full ethics audit, crew suspended, airline grounded pending review. That moment, a military official boarded the plane, called Claire by name, and asked her to step off for an ethics review. Captain Rains tried to apologize to Kalani, but the major just said, "I want transparency, not for me, for the 212 people watching, people who trusted you." The message spread. This wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability, and the whole world was watching. Reporters swarmed the terminal. Hashtags like Flight 488 and Bias in the Skies trended everywhere, and within 48 hours, Skylift's flights were suspended in 7 countries. Revenue froze, partnerships ended, all because one man refused to stand when he was told he didn't belong. But the fight didn't stop there. Skylift tried to sneak back into the system through shell companies, rebranding as Eastway Aero, using Kalani's own words in their marketing, but he saw through it, found the buried clause letting crew downgrade service based on customer energy levels, and exposed the bias loop with a live demo that went viral overnight. The new airline's license was pulled, the scheme collapsed, and this time, nobody believed the apologies. Kalani didn't crow about it. Instead, he worked quietly with an international panel, drafting a new passenger dignity framework, Clause 13. No airline can own the system that audits its own behavior. That firewall spread from Jordan to Morocco, shutting down cover-up attempts before they could start. When Skylift tried to manipulate the narrative with AI-generated deep fakes and influencer campaigns, Kalani and a coalition of watchdogs released the entire playbook to the public, and suddenly, even the most stubborn deniers had to face the truth. By the time the Geneva session rolled around, 87 countries and 14 airlines had adopted the Passenger Integrity Accord. For the first time, ethics scores were visible to passengers. AI couldn't hide discrimination, and crew training would be cross-audited globally. When it passed, people didn't clap. They just stood quietly, like the way Kalani had stood on that flight, silent but unyielding. So here's the thing: if you've ever been told to sit down, to accept less, or to just go along because that's the way it's always been, this story's for you. Would you have spoken up? Or would you have done what Kalani did, let the silence speak until the whole world had to listen? Tell us below. Do you believe dignity should ever be optional? And if you think it's time to put passenger dignity in the front seat again, share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes you don't need to shout to change the system, you just need to refuse to move.